This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1093, a conversation with Kelly Thompson.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. This is episode 1093. It's a conversation with Kelly Thompson. Kelly's actually been on the show 5 times, I believe, before, so this will be her 6th visit. This is a great new conversation talking about Jeff the Landshark, talking about her current projects, talking about Absolute Wonder Woman. So this was a lot of fun to kind of touch base with Kelly, because typically she's on the show about once a year, so it's nice to be able to chat with her about the current projects and how things are going. If you want to check out previous episodes with her, you can check out episode 1044, 1006, 968, 716, and 602. Upcoming episodes will include a Book of the Month Club. We also have an upcoming episode with Ron Friends. So some good stuff coming up in the next few weeks. Make sure to download the podcast or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, or listen to us on Spotify and subscribe to us on Spotify. Also, hope you enjoyed the last episode, which was a bonus episode, 1092B. That was an episode I did with my son talking about his journey through Amazing Spider-Man. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to the podcast, and make sure to email us, comicshenanigans@gmail.com. Let's jump right into the episode. Enjoy a conversation with Kelly Thompson. Enjoy. Kelly, welcome back to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. How are you?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
I am good. It's been 11 months since we had you on. This is your sixth visit to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. So thank you so much for being a returning guest.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I was looking at, what has happened in the past year. So you've actually had a lot happen in terms of your writing and the different projects that have come out. I want to go back to, I guess, around last summer and just kind of mention, it seems so long ago now, but you did have 5 Eisner nominations last year, which is amazing. What I thought was so interesting about it compared to a lot of other creators who were nominated is how each thing was like for a different project, which really showed how varied you were as a creator, and that you really did hit a lot of different notes, and obviously you won one as well. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, I know in the past, it's almost felt like not a therapy session, but we talk sometimes about how you're feeling about how you feel about your place in the industry and how you're kind of progressing at any particular moment in time. And it's been really interesting having different conversations with you throughout the years and seeing how you've had different kind of mindsets as you've kind of navigated. How do you feel in 2025?
I mean, I think, especially with that context, my career is sort of finally hitting that thing that you hope it's going to do, where things are really starting to take off. It's a very weird experience. It's a pleasantly surreal one to have it happening sort of for 2 very disparate things. I mean, Absolute Wonder Woman is for sure the most successful thing I've ever gotten to be a part of both on popularity front and also on reviews and just the word of mouth and people talking about it, and it spinning out really organic people talking to each other about it, which is so exciting to see. And that's the first time I've experienced this to this degree for sure, and to have that happening at the same time that a completely different and yet related thing is happening with Jeff, where he was part of a video game and became incredibly viral, and that in turn has helped launch some new stuff for him. I'm sure new merch and stuff. It's weird to have all of that happening at once and have it all be the same, but also be very different things. One of them I did a long time ago, and one of them not a long time ago, but years ago, and one of them, and it's just taking off now, and one of them I've been, it's been my whole life for the last year. So it's weird. And then it's particularly weird, but I would say this in an upsetting way, for it to be happening as things are sort of really fucking horrible in the world. It's I'm very grateful for it, because it's a thing that's going to help me survive a little longer, hopefully. things going well in this industry and with this career. But, there's a lot of like, really, I finally like got some of this figured out, and we're like, everything's starting to come apart. It's a little like you catch yourself feeling grateful and then angry at the, immediately after that. It's a weird dichotomy to like live in.
Absolutely. I don't usually go straight into politics at all generally on the show, but one thing I'm curious about is someone who works in the industry. What kind of conversations are you having with people about the impact of potential tariffs on places like, Canada or China in terms of the publication industry and how periodicals could survive?
Well, to be honest with you, and, in some cases this is just above my pay grade. It's just not stuff that, Marvel doesn't call me up to talk about, what I think about sales or anything. Like, they keep you in your little boxes, and that's mostly, I'm sure, for a very good reason. I think that regardless of what anyone's politics, what we might be able to agree on is that I don't have any fucking idea. And part of that is because everything changes from day to day. Like, I don't, very little information is filtering down even to someone at my level, because I think a lot of people don't know. I think one of the first things I saw the other day that was like, because we've all been nervous because a lot of books get printed and shipped from Canada, and certainly the readers in Canada, you want them to get it. But I haven't heard a lot about what it means. And then one of the first things we saw was that the tariffs were going to really hit. I don't know if you saw it just last week, I think it was, about bags and boards and like sort of the how you take care of these comics and sort them and ship them and do all that stuff, and they was going to hit with some huge tariffs. And I was like, well, I guess that's, like the first thing we're really seeing. I also got an email from a game company about a statue thing I'd ordered, a Jeff thing, of course, where they're like, yeah, we don't have any idea how much this is going to cost when it's ready. You pre-ordered it. We'll let you know before we charge the card, but it could be anything. I mean, genuinely, they had no idea. And I felt really bad for them, as well as I felt bad for myself in that moment. I felt bad for them because how fucking hard. It's hard enough to run a business without having to send that email out to, I assume, thousands of people. It's incredible. And then, of course, we got already, because of the changes, they said that the bags and boards, like, now that's maybe not an issue, or it won't be as bad an issue, and they don't know. So, like, even within a week, like, it's just chaotic. I don't know how anyone runs a business or does anything like this. I'm lucky because I'm being a little bit insulated from it. But, everyone's worried. It's like, it's such a stupid thing, too, because it's like as if we aren't the individual person operating in 2025, wherever you are, as if you're not already stressed out enough by any number of things. And then just to add this like chaotic layer to everything, it's truly insane. Absolutely.
I am a Canadian, and it's been interesting just because in my lifetime I've never seen Canadians be this patriotic. The idea of like, the amount of suddenly labels and every sign everywhere is like, proudly made in Canada, proudly Canadian. Yeah. And I've just never seen that before. So, I mean, it's been really fascinating to see like the Canadian identity at times doesn't feel like much of one. And now it feels very different. Like, oh no, we're Canadian. It's a big thing. And it's never been something that I've seen before. So it's fascinating to see how quickly something changes.
It's wild to watch something like that just happen before your eyes within not just like a year, but within months.
Yep.
Because that was when he first said that thing, right? It was just like 6 months ago that he said that thing. But one of my best friends is Ed Brisson, who's a Canadian in comics, and he has said a few times to Matt, Ed, and I are very good friends, and we talk pretty much daily. And he's frequently said to Matt and I that like it's very hard to even express to Matt and I, who know him so well, like the changes there in like the sentiment and the how angry people are about certain things and how patriotic they are in other ways, and just all of it, that. And I think, for Matt and I, who are pretty plugged in on this side of things, we're not terribly surprised by that because, we're horrified by what's happening and that it's got our names stamped on it, as comes with being an American. But I think it's a crazy situation.
Absolutely.
I don't know, man.
I'll change the subject for a moment to a bit of ego stroking. So I had put on my calendar.
Good move.
I had put on my calendar, podcast interview, Kelly Thompson. So my son kind of walks up. He knew I had a podcast tonight, so he's 11 years old. He looks at the calendar and goes, Kelly Thompson, you going to ask her about Jeff? And I'm like, wow, how do you know that?
That's awesome.
And I was impressed. And he's like, well, no, I see your name every time I read the Jeff comics. I'm like, I'll make sure to mention that.
Honestly, your kid is light years ahead of where I was, because let me tell you what Kelly Thompson, 11 years old, didn't do. Look at the credits for anything anyone was producing, which is so embarrassing now that I was so. But I've always said, and I know I'm always very slow to get to things. I'm like, my great fear is someone who really wants someone who's a fast learner and who is a real self-starter and a go-getter and someone who can really do things fast. I always feel like if I was in an interview, I'd be like, yeah, I'm the last person you need. I am very good at my job. I'm very detail-oriented. I always care the most about it, and I'm really committed and loyal. But if you want a fast learner who's going to be great at it tomorrow, I am not the pick for you. It takes me a while to figure it out. It takes me a while to get good at it. So I always think that maybe that's part of why it took me so long, even though I wanted to be a writer from a very young age. I never looked at credits. Even when I was reading comics and becoming obsessed with them as a teenager, I knew the artist's name. I rarely knew the writer's names. I don't know why. It's a very weird thing. So your son is light years ahead of me, and tell him I very much appreciate it.
Will do.
The Jeff thing has been so wild. I was just telling someone the other day that on a different podcast that I had a first in my life, which is my brother, who works in a restaurant and works behind the bar frequently, called me very late at night, like 11 o'clock on like a Wednesday or something, and he put these two people, and it was unclear if they're actually his friends or if they're just like people he was being friendly with in the bar, but they were definitely drunk, and they didn't believe him that his sister made, I guess they were talking about Marvel Rivals, and my brother was like, oh, my sister created Jeff the Landshark, and they were like, what? Get out of here. They're like, that's not true, Bubba. He's like, she did. And they're like, made him call me on a Wednesday night, and then we had this drunk conversation. It was hilarious. But that was like the first time that's ever happened, and it was a very funny, like, wow, that's like a moment that you remember the first time that someone made your brother call you to prove that he knew who you were.
How early did you find out from, I guess, Marvel or anyone, I guess, involved with Marvel Rivals? How early did you find out about Jeff being included?
I can't remember the exact date. I guess I could go through my email. I should look, because you're not the first person to ask me that. But I believe it was sometime in this summer. But what it was Jordan White, who I had worked with on a bunch of stuff when I was at Marvel. Although never really directly any Jeff. But he's a big Gwenpool fan, so that might have been how he was the first one to see the footage. So he saw the Marvel Rivals footage of Jeff, like they give him a demo or something, and he emailed me, and he was like, it's really cool. He goes, I think it's going to be a big deal, and boy, was he right.
Did it surprise you that a character like Jeff would be included in something like that, or did it seem like it made more sense?
I think I did know before that email. It's hard to keep track of like what the order of things are, but I either saw from an announcement or Marvel had already had tipped me that he was going to show up. I think I knew just from the world, so maybe that would put a timestamp on when this happened. I think I just saw, but I didn't know if he was going to be a playable character or if he was just going to show up in the background or whatever, so I didn't have any information, and it wasn't until Jordan reached out and told me that the gameplay was so fun that I had an inkling inkling of like, oh, it might be like a really big deal, as opposed to like sometimes he just shows up in a game, like on a mobile game in the background or something, and it's not a thing. But that was the hat tip, like, oh yeah, this will be a big deal. So
yeah, I mean, he's been seen by over 40 million people now. So
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Like it's fascinating to go back to the origins of Jeff and be like, that little guy in the background,
yeah,
like is going to become like a video game star. Like that's really incredible.
Yeah.
And now, like obviously that's surreal. How does that feel when you're still writing his adventures? Like when you're still, coming up with new gags and new things to put him through. How do you kind of keep yourself kind of grounded and that, and also knowing that more people are probably going to be interested in this character and what you're writing now than before?
I think I try not to think about it too much, and I try to just like keep my eyes on my own paper a little bit. Like I fucking created him, so I shouldn't get nervous about it, right? I know what's right for him because he came out of my brain. And I think that honestly the biggest challenge is especially because I'm still involved with him. He's not like something I created a long time ago and then left behind. I'm still writing him actively. And so, and I have trouble with this anyway. Ask anyone, I'm sure they would be happy to provide plenty of unflattering stories of me being too precious about something I'm involved in or something I created or something I wrote. Like I do get sensitive about it. It's my whole stupid little life. Of course it matters to me, And so I have a little bit of trouble letting go and letting other people run and play with the toys. I'm a little petty and selfish that way. I work on it all the time to try to make myself better, but it's a work in progress. So I do think that because I've still got one full foot or leg or whatever in the Jeff pool, it can be even harder to let some of that stuff go. Like I found out he was going to be in something else and I was like, like grumbling to myself, but like of course he is. I mean, he's going to be everywhere. I just bought some boxes from Midtown Comics that have his face all over them, I mean, it's like, it's incredible. So, and yes, I agree, I shouldn't have to buy those myself. Please send a letter. Just kidding. But yeah, it's wild. It's wild to know. I was telling someone else, we were talking about something similar with Jeff and like the virality of it. And like one of my theories that propped up, I mean, listen, it's Marvel Rivals. They did this brilliant thing. They have all these players. Everyone was going crazy over it. It was like that perfect cocktail of cute, but also he was deadly, especially until people started figuring out how to fight him better. So they deserve all credit for like creating something great that captivated people's imagination. But I think it went even further than that, in part because anyone who went looking for information about Jeff, like if you just do a Google search, or better yet, kids, do DuckDuckGo, if you do a search for him, I mean, just all the cutest shit you've ever seen in your life, like, fills the screen of him being a precious little boy that, yes, would like to eat everything, but mostly wants to be friends. And I think that helped, like, because there were these different sides. There were people who were already fans, and they could, like, pull up all this adorable Jeff stuff and be like, no, it's a real thing. And, like, I think it helped sort of swirl it into an even bigger sort of fun storm than it would have been if there wasn't all that stuff out there already about Jeff and it was just the game, or, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I think they ended up working together to create an even bigger, like, fever or fervor, maybe would be the better word.
Now, do you have like a shrine to Jeff? Like, do you have all the stuff? Like, as they create more merch, are you going to have like a whole like wing of your house devoted to Jeff, or like what does this look like?
Listen, if Jeff can buy me a house, he can have his own room until such time. He's going to have to squeeze in with everyone else. I have a lot of fun stuff. I don't have a lot of room to display it. I definitely don't have everything. But I do have little piles. I have a box I've made full of stuff to maybe put out someday, and then like I have a few things scattered around. I'm looking right now at a fun, like a knit or crochet, maybe is the word, Jeff, that I got from someone off Tumblr, I think.
Oh, wow.
That was very early. They had like a pattern for him, and it's adorable. So, and I have a few of the things that have come out that are like official merch. So, I mean, I suspect that stuff is going to gear up pretty intensely. So, I know they're a little late to the party, but I would be shocked if they don't put their foot on the gas now, given everything that's happening.
Do you have any specific Jeff merch that goes next to the Eisner that you won for Jeff?
It's just books where the Eisners are. They need more space too, especially because I'd like to grow them some friends. So we need to make more room to prepare.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned earlier Absolute Wonder Woman, which when we talked last year, I don't think it had been announced yet, or maybe it had just been announced because it would have been around early June when we talked. So obviously, it's really hit the ground running. All the Absolute books, especially that first wave of which yours was, I guess, the third to come out, really hit the ground running and really kind of set the sales charts on fire for sure. As you said, is kind of one of the biggest books in terms of the launches that you've been involved with. I'm curious, reading the first arc again today in preparation, I was really taken with your world building and how you've kind of crisscross and kind of go back and forth with, Diana's past and also kind of the present that you're dealing with. I'm curious about the construction of that world and how you were going to tell that narrative as opposed to just doing an origin and moving forward, and how you settled on kind of intercutting the origin with the current continuity.
So that's one of my favorite things, and it wasn't necessarily the original plan. I knew in issue 1 we were going to want that big flashback to her home life and us seeing it literally who raised her and how we see it sort of warm up and become a home, even though it's in the underworld and should be pretty hellish. It's sort of basically locking in the theory of love is transformative, and that's sort of her superpower above and beyond everything else, I would say. But I think it worked so well, and I was so taken by it, and I was so interested in both the witchcraft and especially Circe, and also the location. I thought people would be interested in the location as well. So I thought that would be pretty interesting, and I thought if I could do an even better job than I historically have with flashbacks, where I really make them part of the key to unlocking, either for her or the reader or both of us, ideally, parts of the plot and the story and the mystery of what she's dealing with going forward, I thought it could be really powerful. And I think for that first arc, it really is. I think the second arc breaks the format a little bit, and we don't really get back to it until 9, really. But I just think seeing this version of Diana and seeing how she came to be and seeing how her whole life has been about preparing for these moments that we're going for now, and how her failures in the past and her successes inform the choices she makes now, I just think it's a pretty powerful cocktail. I can't promise it's always going to function that way. 6 and 7 broke the format a little bit, but they still managed to have in the past and now. Whether it was her regaling Hades with her tales or being questioned by him, or the more, I would say 7 is more intercut, but it still is intercut from a present and a past, as opposed to the way it weaved in issue 6. But I just think with enough time and world building and ideas about what came before and what comes next, I think they work really well together. And it seems to have been borne out so far. We'll see if it gets tired. I don't think it's going to. I think some of the flashbacks in this next arc, 8 through 12, they're just, I hope they're what people want, or if not, then they turn out to be what people need. I think people want to see how she managed to make herself into this. I think in this next arc that's coming up, it will answer some of the training questions people have, if she wasn't raised by Amazons and they didn't teach her how to fight, how did that happen? So I think we'll see some of that kind of stuff, but also just in how she processes these things and how her relationships to the gods are, which are much closer in some ways than there are some of the gods are like very involved in her life in a way that I think main universe Diana is not true. The gods always play a heavy role in her stories, but it doesn't mean she's that close to them. I mean, even Hera, who's more of her go-to goddess in the main universe, like I don't ever get the sense of like a close relationship between them. But I did feel like the conversation in 5 that Diana has as an adult with Hecate, who we can assume she's encountered over the years, they had a pretty civil conversation. I mean, she was still apologetic and deferential. It's a goddess, but the goddess is like scolding her for like, not listening to her mother and stuff. So I think they're a huge part of her life in a way that's very interesting and ironically in a way that requires that she not have much faith, because you don't have to have faith in a thing that's like literally talking to you and handing you a lasso back, right? That's a very real thing that's given you superpowers, but it still requires like this kind of devotion and sacrifice and these other things that I think are very interesting and we'll keep delving into.
I was very curious in the first 5 issues when you're doing them with Hayden, or Haydn, how do you actually pronounce that?
It's Hayden. It is Hayden.
Okay. I'm curious about your scripting process because the panel layouts are so specific and very like next level. They're not your typical grids, right? Like there's very elegant panel work. I'm curious how you wrote your scripts and then how you were then dialoguing it afterwards, kind of looking at, and how much of a dialogue was there with Hayden about some of the choices he would make in terms of panel layout and construction, because it's very different. It definitely breaks format than what you would normally expect a, big 2 comic to look like, but in all the best ways. So I'm curious how you approach that and how you learn to kind of lean into that.
I think it mostly is about leaning into it. Sometimes I'll write fewer panels to a page and less actions because I can just tell Hayden's going to do something more complicated with it, and I want to leave them room to do that. I think, ironically, prior to working with Hayden on this, I would have said I was a person who doesn't really like fancy panel borders. Not that I don't like them, but that I only want to see them in like specific scenarios, right? It's like, sure, J.H. Williams can do whatever he wants on Batwoman. It looks incredible. Do the weirdest panels you ever want. But most of the time what you get when people are messing with panels, especially if you're slightly traumatized from the 90s like I am, you get random things that are not for the benefit of the story. They're just, if someone's breaking the panel, I want it to be with purpose. Like there needs to be reason behind that, power or storytelling or narrative or whatever. And that's what's so great and what's maybe such a convert of Hayden's style, because there's always purpose to it and it always is additive. It's never distracted. I mean, occasionally, and that spread in 5 where Steve is sort of bringing Diana back from the brink, that's a page that or a double page spread that out of context I wouldn't have liked, because the reading order's a little tricky. Like your eye lands in a place, and even in the final, your eye gets to where you're going before I want you to get there. And there's just not a way to prevent that or to fully prevent that, no matter what we did. But in context with the full emotional weight, I found the way Hayden laid that out to be worth it. Like, yes, the reading order, we're sacrificing a little bit there, but just the imagery is so powerful and the way it works. So I just feel like I've learned a lot working with Hayden. I think we're bringing out sort of the best in each other. I think I try to leave them room to do as much of this as they want to do, because I think it's incredible. But also, part of the reason I feel that way is because I also know that they really respect me in the process. For example, a section that doesn't have any cool paneling or any of that structure to it is that huge flashback, 3 or 4 double-page spreads in issue 1 that are just completely bare. And I think that's not only Hayden respecting me as the person who constructed that, it's also Hayden respecting the point of what that is, right? And adding a lot of beautiful filigree edges or whatever is not helping that narrative, which is about a broken down, bare space slowly warming up and becoming a home. And the important thing was to focus on those details that were changing and also the colors that we were going to bring into it. And Hayden didn't question it for a second. Hayden didn't try to force any kind of cool stylistic thing onto it, because they get it too. They want people to take from that moment the thing we were driving toward and success. And so I think when you have that experience, especially on an issue 1, that's such like a high wire act, and really risky, honestly, that number 1. It's sort of amazing to me that DC let us do it. I'm very grateful. But, you know, when Hayden trusts you, then you want to trust Hayden. You know, it's the beauty of a collaborative relationship, and it helps you make something better than either of you could have done, you know?
That spread you mentioned, which had, you know, so much kind of space to it, you got to feel that space that they're living in. And Jordi Belair's colors really bring it even more to life, and because there's so much interesting color choices as you go through the different kind of panels sequencing and seeing different kind of things colored in different ways. Really, it takes your eye in different places. So it was just a fantastic coloring job.
Yeah, agreed. We talked about it early on, and you know, I've worked with Jordi a lot, and I think she's one of the best colorists in the business. So I wasn't really concerned, but we were all very on the same page about, about what that needed to convey. And just incredible. It's hard to say this. I've been very lucky overall with, not just my artists, but like my whole teams. I've been so lucky to work with so many times, just people that I really want to work with my whole life. You know, Leonardo Romero is one of the first artists I got to build something with Hawkeye. And then we've come back to each other a couple times, including with the first arc of Birds of Prey. You know, Mattia De Elias, I did creator-owned work on. I worked with Jessica Jones. Now he did 2 issues of Absolute Wonder Woman, Meredith McLaren. All these people, I keep wanting to keep working with them, and I love what we can bring to each other. But I have to say, Absolute Wonder Woman, you know, has been, I should have said Grey Hero too. I just get them so much. I feel so in sync with them. But, you know, Hayden brought out a thing in me that, I don't know. I think it's something I've been working on for a long time, to try to level up and think about the work a little differently. And I just think something about the collaboration and Hayden's work and our work with Jordi and Becca, it just coalesced into something really perfect. And it's the kind of experience you hold on to for as long as you can. And after it ends, I'll probably always chase it. It's been incredible.
I'm really curious, because I'm curious about the genesis of this. You have the Lil Diana kind of pages at the end of 6 and 7. So I'm curious, what was the genesis of including those or even coming up with those? Because what I like about them is that they're fun, but also like they still feel consequential to her development as a character. So I'm curious, you know, how did you end up getting those pages to kind of add in? Were you short on the actual plot and you're like, well, this could be fun? Like, I'm very curious what the back and forth was with editorial to even develop this.
So I'm a very big fan of Dustin and going way back, and one of many things I've liked of theirs was their Little Gotham stuff. Little Gotham was some of my favorite stuff for a long time when it was coming out. I just thought it was so perfect. And so this seemed like a way to get that. I don't always want like a little thing like that in the back of the issues, because sometimes, you know, you're trying to build all this tension and everything, and then you're like, and then here's some little jokey fun bits. But I did think that in 6 and 7 they were so dark, and the narrative had less of a build that we were trying to do. I mean, yes, there was a cliffhanger between 6 and 7, but it just didn't have the same kind of attempt to build. And so I thought they might work a little bit better there. I thought they also might work as a better contrast to Mattia's super highly realistic work, and then these are sort of lighter and looser. And then but I'm always hesitant about it, except for we had established just all these really cute, charming things about young Diana, and they're things that I knew we're not going to be able to get into too much in the regular line. And so maybe this is a way to get some of those sort of cuteness and charming adventures like still in there without drawing from the narrative we're pulling out in the main book. So that was my first pitch, and then it worked out that Mattia really could only handle the 40 pages instead of the 44. And so we were like, well, that's perfect. We'll do 2 pages in 6 and 2 pages in 7, and that will make everyone happy. So I've made the pitch to do more Little Diana. What I'd like to do is a one-shot that probably would also include those 4 that we already saw, but then would be a new story and maybe some more shorts kind of thing. So I hope that, I don't know that they're going to go for that, but I hope so. I know Dustin would like to do more, so hopefully we'll get the chance.
Did you find it easy to tap into a humorous side of what is ostensibly like a dark origin for this character?
I totally find it easy. I think because just in that first issue, like when she picks up that lizard, I mean, first of all, she yeets the snake, which there was a lot of talk about whether we wanted to use the yeet sound effect or not. In the end, I'm glad we did. I'm glad we stuck with it because it does speak to some of her other behaviors with those little demons and creatures later. And when that thing blasts her in the face with hellfire and she scolds it and then gives it a kiss on the head, I just thought, that's Diana, and people love that about her, and why shouldn't we show more of this, you know? So it's a little bit like that. What I find most challenging about it is that even though I came into it thinking, oh, this will be easy, this has words, and I write these Jeff stories all the time, and they don't have any words, and that's really hard. But it turned out I'm not used to writing one-pagers, so I did struggle a little bit with that. You know, a Jeff short, even though it doesn't have words most of the time, it's still more like 15 pages, so that's more like 3 pages. And so I did find myself a little unfamiliar with the page restriction, which I made for myself. I could have made them like, you know, two page little stories, or I could have made them a page. We thought about doing like a page of like strips, you know, as opposed to anything else, as opposed to like a page of comics. But so I painted myself into that corner, and I was happy with where we landed. It was more difficult than I thought. You forget about that when you're having grand ideas in the pitch.
When reading, you know, the first arc of Absolute Wonder Woman, one thing I don't think I expected the first time, and rereading it, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this, and how powerful it is as a parental story. That, you know, we go into it expecting to, you know, read a great Diana story, which we do get, but we also get this really compelling narrative with Cersei as you know, the mother figure. She is not even mother figure; she is the mother of Diana. So I'm curious how you tapped into writing a parent in such an astute way, because again, it really hit me as a parent in that specific spot of like, well, this definitely does feel like a parent. So how did you kind of tap into that?
Well, thank you. I cry a lot when I write it, so I'm glad other people are understanding it. I don't know. I'm not a mother. I have a mother. My mother is adopted, so I think that probably helps a little bit in how I think about Cersei as an adopted mother, and that there's no real difference. It's whoever raises you, that's your mother. I mean, I'm not taking away from Hippolyta. She's still Diana's mother too, but no more so than Cersei, who raised her. I think a lot of what Diana is comes from inside herself and from the gifts from the gods that she has that makes her particularly blessed in certain ways. She certainly has a Herculean level of patience for people, for humanity, and ability to find compassion in the least likely places, unlike myself. But I think, you know, being raised by Cersei is quite a different conundrum. It really prepares you for some things in some ways, and it also has the risk of, it's a very one-sided perspective to be raised by a sorceress who often would rather turn humans into pigs than talk to them, and then also you're in the underworld. So, it's a very specific upbringing. I think Circe goes out of her way to make it more broad and diverse and less her point of view, probably, because she gets Diana's role in everything, and that someday she's going to be out contending with all of this. But yeah, I don't know. I just, I write about things all the time that I don't have very direct experience with. So I think if I can tap into the character and feel like I really understand the character, most of the rest tends to flow from that. So
I will say that reading through that first issue in particular, there's a few, I'll quote some specific lines of your own, if you don't mind me doing so, that I just thought were incredibly powerful and really interesting. I'm curious what kind of led you to them. And they're all kind of the same stripe. And I think they're in successive pages. It was like I saw one and I'm like, well, got to write that down when I ask her about that. And then the next page, oh, that one too. So I'm just going to read a few of them and you can kind of tell me some of the inspirations behind them. So the first one that really took me and really made me think about it was how you fall in love with a child is by raising it. I love that line. And then almost immediately you follow it up with raising a child is how you fall in love, which I also loved, but letting them go is how you prove your love. So really, I'm almost going to get emotional here, but it just, those things really hit me. And as someone who also has a biological child and an adopted child, so it really resonated with me in those kind of moments. So I'm curious, those are beautiful sentiments. I'm curious what went into kind of crafting those.
I think it's mostly just how I think every parent must feel, and particularly to how you prove it is by letting them go. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think it's why people relate to it and respond to it. But I also think, again, it just coming from the character more than anything, to me, that's Circe in that moment. She's saying a true thing that most of us can relate to or understand, but she's also saying a thing to protect herself, right? Because she knows she's going to have to let this child go, and it's become most of her world. So she has to know that she's doing something in letting that go, and also just preparing herself for that eventuality, which I think is very relatable as well. Like, for any parent, when you're taking care of a child, it's so vulnerable and dependent on you, and eventually it will not be, and you have to let it go. And I just can't imagine anything harder. I don't want to say there are parallels there also in Diana removing her arm, but I think there are. These are the sacrifices, right? Tell me it's not more than an arm that Circe loses when she lets Diana, or when she helps Diana escape into the world to be left behind, These are powerful, very real things that we all feel, I think. So Circe just happens to be a little heightened.
In issue 6 and 7, as you mentioned, you have Mateus kind of come on board. Did you suggest that as being the next collaborator to kind of do a fill-in, so to speak, or how did that come about?
I did bring up Mattia. I think that I knew we would work well together. I knew he'd draw an incredible Diana. I think that was one of my number ones. But I think the number one reason that we went with Mattia, other than just everyone loving him and being excited about him, is that there were conversations about, should we try and Hayden has such a specific style, should we be trying to keep that throughout the book? And we just really didn't think it was possible. Like, there are only a very small handful of people who can do, or who do what Hayden does, and like one of them is Mobius, who's not going to draw the book. So I think we were like, there's a short list of people who can sort of keep this vision consistent. It's unlikely we'll be able to get them, and even if we can, we're not going to be able to lock them in for every time. We need to have a variant artist. And so once we realized that, I think, I certainly thought, I won't speak for the rest of the team, although everyone seems very happy with where the book is, so I guess we have to say we agree, but my feeling was, if we're not going to try to keep the style similar, I'd rather push dramatically against it. So what's a style that we like for this that will be just very different, and then we'll do something different, you know? And I feel like it really paid off. You know, the way comic artists have to work is so unrelenting. I know people get upset when artists change, but it's just too brutal a schedule, guys. It's not reality. And by that same token, like, I saw some people, which I don't really appreciate, but we all have our opinions, saying that they liked Mattia's art more, and that's, you know, fine for you to feel that way, but there's a reason Mattia's not on the main book. Like, that digital painting style takes an incredible amount of time, not enough time to do a monthly book that way. So if you're so in love with that style, just remember that part of the reason you're in love with it is because it takes longer than a monthly comic book takes, you know? And so that's part of it. That's part of the alchemy of figuring all of this out. And, you know, I do think that one of editors' hardest jobs, although probably the most rewarding when you get it right, is casting a book and pulling that team together, you know? For sure. What everyone can do, what they're willing to do, what's even possible, you know?
Absolutely. Now, I'm curious, because you knew that you were going to be getting, you know, someone else doing 7 and 8, how far in advance were you able to kind of work on those scripts to provide the extra lead time so that they were able to do their best work?
Yeah, I mean, I was. I think the script for 7 was a few days late off of what we wanted to be. But in general, yeah, I mean, I think Mattia was drawing 6 back in, like, September. He had that script. So, you know, we were moving pretty far ahead. Hayden works incredibly fast, too. I think that there's no swing on that. That's the greatest thing ever in the world, is to have a super fast artist who's, like, delivering like that. But it can, you know, when you're planning out how your scripts go, you know, you're sort of tailoring it to when the artist needs the work. And Hayden's so fast, it's, like, hard for me to, I'm like, oh shit, Hayden's gonna need that script now. So, like, sometimes there's been some shuffling around a little bit like that because of Hayden's speed. But in general, it's yeah, you know, it's a when you see the spreadsheets that, like, the talent management people and the editors and everything have to do, the production schedule people who have to do the math for, well, we could have this artist, but only if we start them here, because if we start them here by issue 3, they're going to be this far behind, and you're like, oh my god, I do not want to know about this. It's particularly why it's annoying when people are like, yeah, it's like magic, and you're like, actually no, it's a lot of math and a lot of hard work, and everyone's tired.
So I want to ask a question about issue 6 in particular. There's a fantastic sequence that you do with Prometheus, which is really enjoyable. But what I really liked about it was the interesting melding of how you were writing it and also the art by Matthias, because there's so many interesting inflections on Prometheus's face that he's able to develop and input, which add almost like a playfulness to what Prometheus is saying, even though he, you know, because he's been freed temporarily from, you know, from his torture. But there's just this interesting acting that he's putting on his face, which is so phenomenal and subtle. And then your script is kind of dovetailing off of that. I'm curious if you had to do any kind of rewrites of your script to kind of match what you were seeing in the actual inflection points on the face.
I think Mattia is just so good at expressions, and also he's very careful about scripts. He's very I don't want to say, like, he just takes it very seriously. He really pays attention to what the characters are saying and what I'm asking for in the moments. And in fairness to both of us, I'm very interested in the interior emotions of the characters, so I'm very quick to put that on the page, you know, like, it could be a moment where it doesn't seem like an emotional thing, but I want the artist to remember, like, listen, they just lost someone from their lives, you know, in this similar way not long ago. So, like, this moment we should really feel it on their face, like all they're going through here or whatever. Like, I'm very interested in that. I don't know that every other writer does that. I'm sure other people do other things better, much better than me, and pay more attention to other things. But, like, that's one of the things that I always feel like I have pretty under control. And I think artists, the ones that I work really well with, like, they really respond to that same kind of thing. It's one of the reasons we work well together. So there's not a lot of rewriting. I think I did end up doing some rewriting in that Prometheus scene, but it was all about trimming just to get text off of that incredible, it was so atmospheric in that scene. Mm-hmm. And so I just don't want a lot of ugly balloons like laying over top of it. So there were a few places where I was trying to cut back because I just felt it was too heavy-handed. Mm-hmm.
We're close to the end of our time, and I've been remiss in not mentioning the fact that you did more Black Cloak. You did a great 3 issues of Powerpuff Girls, and you also did you continue to do amazing work on Birds of Prey. I do want to focus in on Birds of Prey for a moment, just because It felt like after your second arc, which was this big, grand, kind of jumping through different worlds and having different artists to kind of portray them, then you come into All In, and it felt like somehow your batteries got recharged in the middle of doing all that other craziness, and it felt like you were even more focused. Did you feel like it was different coming into year 2 compared to year 1?
Well, yeah, I mean, I lost our editor, Ben, who built the book with me. And so I lost Leo and Ben at about the same time. And it was really devastating. I mean, I'm very glad Jordy stayed on, because the next issues 7 through 13, I guess. Yeah. 7 through 13 were, they were hard, man. They were hard. I knew I was doing this little bridge arc that Javier Pina and David Lopez drew, and I love those 2 issues. I think they don't narratively tie as closely to the previous arc or the next arc as I want. Like, they're just supposed to be a bridge there and sort of a fun, separate thing that's also related, but, it's a little messy in there. Like, we didn't execute it quite like I wanted. And then we headed into this portal arc, which I actually think is incredibly fun. I just think in a couple places it was getting too chaotic for people. And, I don't know, the artists and I and Jess, but the new editor, and Jordy, it was pretty tough. It was a really rough year trying to get those issues out. New artists every time. They were great, but, it's hard to rebuild things every issue with, a new team a little bit. So it was hard, but it was frustrating to me because people were mad that we had different artists, but we tied it so well to these different reskinning of these worlds. And, they're just, I don't know, I just felt like people were just mad Leo wasn't there. And I was like, listen, me too. I built this arc because I knew someone like Leo could handle it. But once we lost Leo, there wasn't time to replace Leo with someone of Leo's caliber. And so the best way to get the best artist on the book turned out, let's do this thing that's weird, but that will give everybody a chance for much better artists that we were going to be able to get on short notice for an arc. Instead, everyone can jam out on their own. And then, it gave us a chance to have Javier Pina drawing incredible dinosaurs and sort of Savage Land-like costumes for the Birds of Prey. And it allowed us to have an incredible cartoon issue with Sophie Campbell and, all these things that I really loved. But it was a hard arc. It was hard on everyone. And then it's even worse when you're like, wow, we're working so hard and people aren't completely gelling with it. So when we came back with Sammy and with, Jordy had left the book so that she could do Wonder Woman, Absolute Wonder Woman, it was a chance to sort of refresh it and just sort of simplify it. And we've been living in that space ever since, I think with mixed results. I really love the characters. But it also, I feel like I'm constantly comparing poor Birds of Prey now to Absolute Wonder Woman, and honestly, almost everyone loses that fight. So it's not really fair to give the Birds of Prey such a hard time for not being Absolute Wonder Woman, But how can you not, right? Because you're like, wait, I'm putting all this effort in, and it just is not taking off the same way, I don't know. It's an interesting
I will say
thing to struggle with.
from a reader's perspective, I mean, so I did enjoy having all the different artists, and because as you said, it was baked into the concept more, or at least it felt like you were able to kind of ride the wave better, so that even though you had various artists, it did feel more natural to the plot, and I did like that. That being said, like, the plot is a lot bigger and crazier, and not that I didn't like that, I do like that, but I think Birds of Prey, for me personally as a reader, I like it when it's a little bit more, urban, and or at least not as out there. That being said, it was nice to kind of have, it was an interesting juxtaposition with the first arc too, which I think made it work. But the last, I don't know, what is it, 6 or 7 issues, I think have been just utterly fantastic. I think the character work's been so strong, and like even in the this current arc, like On the Run, Part 1 has great cliffhangers. Part 2, you have so much good building tension as you go through the issue, because you're like, well, how are they going to get out of how you left them in the last issue? And then you have another cliffhanger with the second chapter. So I think it's been a fantastic read and continues to be consistently enjoyable.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot. Unfortunately, one of the real big downsides of being so reclusive as I am is, short of online, which social media is pretty shit now, I don't really get to talk that much with people who are reading the books, sort of actively engaged with them. So thank you so much. It means a lot, and it's helpful to me to think about it. I mean, I do feel like the book has really been going hard for a while now, but I felt like I was working just as hard for the portal, for the pocket dimension arc, and I could feel people's frustration with it. So now it's I see people commenting. I see there's been a lot of excitement about Ink being back. I saw a lot of people being freaked out by what she did at the end of the last issue and wondering about her and everything. So it does feel like we've got a little heat on it now. But it's hard. It's hard to self-generate when you're sort of in the middle of the pack, and so it's hard to break yourself out. I mean, I think a lot of this On the Run arc was about experimenting with what we had and what we could do. I do agree with you that one of my favorite thing about the book all this time has been these characters and how to build them and show this, how do you do fun, heisty, adventure-y stories and also build up sort of almost soap opera-like plots. We just don't get long enough runs to do that these days. So in this case, I feel like we got pretty close. A lot of the stuff that's building with Sin and some of the stuff with Cass and even Barda, she doesn't change as much as the others, but their dynamics do, and I love that about them.
Yeah, as you said, the character work is what really makes it sing, and then again, some of the character interactions that I've enjoyed so much that you've been writing are ones I would not have even thought of, like having Big Barda and Cassie be an interesting duo, and how kind of maternal Big Barda feels around her is not something I would necessarily would have expected, but I love that take on the characters, and I want to see more of them together, and when they're together, or even when they're apart, but just feeling their affection for one another is really interesting. And you have that with various different characters, but that's obviously, I think, probably my favorite, because there's just something so interesting about those two connecting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Barda and Cass are sort of magic on the page, and it's sort of, I had this feeling that it would happen. When I asked for this weird cast, and Ben was like, okay, he's like, whatever you think, whatever you want to do. I was like, thanks, man. And, when I turned in the first script for Barda, he was like, oh, I really like how you write Barda. I didn't really know what that was going to be. And I was like, me either. I think I had an idea, but I wasn't totally sure. And I definitely didn't know how much Barda and Cass were going to just work, but I just started writing them, and it just happened. And again, that's my biggest argument for when people are like, ooh, what a weird cast or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but that's how you get magic. Put these characters, we see the same characters interacting so much all the time. Aren't you curious about banging two others that we don't ever get to see together? What happens if you bang them together? And I think Barda and Cass is a perfect example of, well, sometimes you get magic. sometimes it doesn't work, but it's worth it for the lottery wins there, you know?
Absolutely. In issue 21, I don't think it's a spoiler to mention it, but there's a great shot of Oracle talking to, trying to get in communication with various different agents in her network. And I loved the character work on there, just the reactions that the different characters had to even being contacted. Like Zealot being like, yeah, no chance of that. Like,
I saw someone say after the issue, they're like, I'm so excited, Zealot's coming back. I was like, did you read what she said? Because I wouldn't count on it. She is not coming anywhere near them again, short of someone being absolutely dead.
I'm curious about a page like that, because that's one that, like, in theory, almost doesn't need to be there, because it adds so much to the world, and that's one thing I like about your world building. Like, you're keeping, even though these characters may not be in the book right now, they still exist in this world. We're checking in on that in some way. So I'm curious, like, how you even kind of came up with the idea of, like, I should have this type of page, and this is the different characters I want to have kind of be contacted, because they're not necessarily being used, but we're checking in.
I think that I'm always struggling to find ways to make Barbara's part of it visually engaging. She's the smartest person there. She's in charge. She's controlling a lot of it. So she's always interesting, and she's always smart, and she's sometimes nice or funny or, any number of things. But visually, she's a person in a chair looking at a computer most of the time. So I'm always struggling a little bit with that, I think. And we've been deploying more and more stuff to kind of engage her in the team in a more direct way while she also does her stuff. And so the drones we've been using more, and like the idea of her controlling the drones with like a virtual, apparatus, things like that. And I just really wanted her to show off her power of being able to contact all these people across the globe in a second with this encrypted information. I think it's really funny. I don't remember how I asked for it. I don't think I asked for the monitors. Maybe I did ask for the monitors. I can't remember now if I asked Sammy to make those panels as monitors, or if I was just saying, we should see where they are and let's frame them out like this. But then, so he definitely drew them as literal monitors, and it was so cool. I didn't blink. And then it's been very funny to see people online going, I love what a creep Barbara is, that we're seeing. It's as if she has spy cameras installed everywhere. And I was like, oh man, I was like, that is very Barbara, I guess. That is very Oracle. Even if it was slightly unintentional on our parts.
It's interesting hearing you talk about, kind of coming up with things to keep her visually interesting, because especially like in this most recent issue, in issue 21, I thought you, and then a combination of you and Basri, the artist, do a great job of selling how powerless she feels when things are going on, and that there's nothing she can do. And so she's looking at the screen, she's frantic. There's something about the acting and the facial expressions that Basri is giving Oracle, as she's like, she knows that Barda's coming to Earth and can't do anything about it, and it's just like freaking out and trying to talk to Barda, but that, again, she doesn't even know Barda can hear her. Like, I thought it was very palpable, and so it's interesting that you say you have this kind of struggle, but it felt like you really tapped into what someone like this, who wants to control things and be on top of things, would feel in this moment, because she's trapped behind a computer and she's not out there.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's certainly intentional, but you never know how much of what you're doing is cracking through, right? So I really appreciate that. I love that you get that. I will also say that even though we've striven to make some more plotty stuff that's visually interesting for Barbara, one really incredible thing about Sammy, I mean, he just draws the most beautiful birds. They're so great, and he's so good at expressions. And so you can, with someone like Sammy, you can put her in a computer room and have her yelling at a computer and looking worried because she's just got static and all that stuff. You can do that because he's that much of an artist, and we're very lucky. There's some stuff coming up with her where sometimes he'd draw her and she's all these freckles, and I'm like, she's lying on the ground, but is she the most beautiful comic book character ever? She just looks incredible. It's so good with the expressions and the emotions, and stuff really is dialing up a bit with her and Dinah. Not in a we hate each other way, but in a we're not aligned here, and we need to get our shit together, the parents are fighting kind of a thing. And so we're trying to pull all that pressure on them. But, it's a lot of things, including, you don't lose a new god who's your friend, who should be, unkillable, untakeable. It's a huge gut punch when you think you're a pro superhero and then that happens to you. So, I mean, they're definitely spun right now,
Mm-hmm. One last question about this particular issue. In that shot we mentioned with the monitors, with Oracle connecting with everyone, I'm curious if this was an artistic note, like of something that you guys asked for, or if this is just something Basri came up with, is that throughout the issue when we see shots of Oracle, the glasses are see-through. But there's on this panel, we can't see her eyes, and it's really haunting visual, but also really arresting. And so I'm curious if that was a deliberate note that you guys gave, if that was just the decision by the artist, because it really does change the complexion of the vision. If you could see her eyes, it would hit different. So I'm curious if there was a discussion about that, or if that was just what they came back with.
There was not a discussion about that, but I do think that's a perfect example of Sammy just getting it and doing the right thing. Like, because I didn't specifically write that, I don't think. But when he sent it in, I was like, yes, this is it. That's it. And you're right. Like, not showing the eyes is a completely different vibe. And also, by the way, goes to the monitors thing. So whether I wrote the monitors in or not, it does seem like Sammy was like, yeah, she's got cameras and everything else, and we shouldn't see her eyes right now, because that is some shady shit.
So
I'm gonna have to look at my script after we get off and see if I ask for monitors or just panels. Anyway.
So I will let you get back to your evening in a moment, but what can you tease us with upcoming projects you're working on?
So unfortunately, I do have a really big announcement, but I'm not sure how far we're out, so I can't say anything really about it. But there will be a big announcement coming, and I've got this It's Jeff book that's starting up in June, which has been very fun and very cool. And if you've been wanting more Jeff content and like sort of, I don't know, I don't call It's Jeff shallow, but this is definitely denser, right? 100 pages of Jeff is a lot. And yeah, more Absolute Wonder Woman. This new arc starts up with 8 later at the end of this month. I'm very excited for people to get back into it. It's got the debut of some new to us, but old to Wonder Woman characters, and more Veronica Cale, and yeah, just a lot of cool shit. You're maybe going to get to see Wonder Woman's like base of operations. So it's very fun. Birds of Prey, we're continuing this on the run where the birds are kind of on their back foot. It's been very fun. I think it's got some real surprises coming, and I hope you guys will love it.
Excellent. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for coming back. It's always a joy to chat with you about your work. Given our usual schedule, maybe it'll be in a year from now. Who knows? But it's always fun. It's always interesting. I'm always like, is it too early to ask her to come back? So usually, I think a year is usually where I end up about.
Well, I'm happy to come back anytime. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.